Hi, I'm Josh Korody. I'm a producer, mixer, and engineer here in Toronto, Canada, and my studio is called Candle Recording. Yeah, so I had been playing music and playing in bands at a pretty teenage. I think I started around like 13 or 14, and when I graduated from my first college program, which is like a general studies program. I had been waiting a couple years to try to get into a music industry arts program at Fanshawe. Um, and it's a program that you can't get into right after high school. You need like basically a prerequisite. So I went to college locally and basically got the prerequisite, got into the program, and essentially it was 2 years and a little bit of each aspect of the music industry. So there was a bit on production, business, contracts, computers and technology and stuff like that. And it just kind of gives everyone like a little taste of all the different aspects. And I think I was about 20 at the time and not totally sure which avenue I wanted to pursue, or even if I wanted to pursue music full time. But I guess having a college program that was all about the music industry gave like my parents a little bit of more, it kind of legitimized what I wanted to do a little bit more. Like it was a little bit easier to like convince them that there is a career in this.
Mhm.
So, and they had heard a lot of good things from the program. So they were pretty supportive of that. Um, went into there, and I would say sometime maybe in the second half of the 2 years, we had an opportunity to record basically record something for our engineering project. And the day that I had that studio time, which was super late at night, it was like something like 2 in the morning or something. My studio time block was like 2 a.m. till 5 a.m. or something. Um, myself and a couple friends in the program went to go see a band play, which was the Markin Side, who are no longer a band, but they were from Toronto and they were playing the campus basically. And I just like basically was blown away by their set. They were just like a really good rock and roll band, like insanely, like just a great energetic live band that really played off of each other. It was really exciting to watch. And they had mentioned that they were playing the next night in London, and London, Ontario is not really it's really not a place to do a ton in. So I assume that like there was a chance that maybe they were free that night, or at least for a few hours. And so I went up to them after their set and asked them if they'd be interested in recording with me. I was like really transparent that I basically was a student, didn't know really what I was doing, but I had other people in the class helping me out. And basically I just offered to record them for free at the school. And their reply was something like, "Oh yeah, we were just going to go see the new King Kong movie or something at the time." And so they basically agreed to do it. And they came in at like 1 in the morning or something like that. And I think at the time that studio was all tape as well. So I'm knowing that they were kind of like a bit of like a throwback band. I figured the tape would have probably enticed them a little bit.
Cool.
And I basically just told them they could record whatever they wanted to. It could be covers, it could be B-sides, whatever they wanted.
Mhm.
You know, and they weren't obligated to release it or anything like that. And basically I had help from about 3 other friends in the program. And we kind of all um, designated roles to set up the band live in the room to tape. And I guess in that moment, I was almost more like the producer, like executive producer of the whole project. Like I wasn't doing all the technical stuff. Like I had one person running tape, one person was helping with microphones, and I was doing some engineering, but I was also kind of just like overseeing the whole thing and communicating with the band. And so before I was ever outside of school, that was kind of like a first taste of like just approaching strangers, as a stranger to a band and just being like, I love what you do. And, it was very honest and pure and, not sleazy or anything like that. It was very just like, hey, I really love what you're doing. I just like love to be a part of it in some way. And it was just like, once we had everything rolling and set up and watching a full band mic'd up and everything was working and coming through the speakers, it was just such a euphoric moment. Really, and I think that was kind of that was sort of like when I decided that I definitely want to keep doing this, and awesome. Kind of realizing I want to do it on my own terms, like not so much work at another studio, but which would have also been cool and a good opportunity. And I did end up interning at a studio in Hamilton after that, but it made me realize like I want to just kind of one-on-one approach a band, talk to them, and communicate and figure out if we're on the same page and go into it with like feeling good about it. I think I've worked on a lot of bands' first records, and I feel like there's a real charm to a band's first record. There's a naiveness that always just somehow gets lost after they've done a record, and or at least had a little bit more experience, and it's hard to get that again. So there is something really special about a little bit of a lack of experience. I think that, and going back to what I said, it's doing a lot of the groundwork beforehand and making sure that you're working with the right person, and the person, like say the producer or engineer, they also feel like they're a good match for the project as well. It's not just like, yeah, I do this and I can do it. It's something that they feel they'll do a good job with. It's the type of work where it can be hard and not every month or every time frame is busy. And, there are people that will say yes to everything, and that can be good because, you have a lot of options and you're kind of putting your eggs in many baskets. But you also have to, if you feel like you're not going to come out with something really special, then I don't know what that's really going to do for you and for like the band's, further career or like resume or reputation. So I think that the biggest thing is going with your natural instinct. Yeah. Because again, there's such a charm and something so original and pure about bands that come into the studio for the first time. But there's also a level of trust that you have to put in to the producer and engineer, because there is a lot of ways about going, how do I say this? Ways about doing things that would be good to let that professional sort of like make certain calls. It's like I've been through a lot of the same scenarios multiple times. And when that happens, you feel pretty confident as an engineer or producer what the results can or cannot be from a certain experience that maybe the band doesn't realize. So I think, it's on my end, it's good to really speak up in those moments so that you're not wasting their time. But you also have to, let a band or let an artist sort of like get what's going on in their head out. There's a certain level of communication that's really important. But I think with a lot of first bands records, there's less pressure,
Yeah.
and I think that really helps. You pretty much feel a little bit more, even though you might not have as much experience, there is like an underlying confidence where you're not necessarily second guessing everything you're doing. And
Yeah.
I find as bands and artists go on and have more experience and more people get involved, like managers and booking agents and labels and other people, you have all these other voices coming into the
Yeah.
picture. And I think that's what separates the first record a lot, because the first record often is just the artist or band and the one probably producer or
Right.
engineer, maybe there's a couple people,
Yeah.
but it's a close-knit thing,
For
and you
sure.
kind of go with your best gut, your best
Yeah.
instinct, and that can often really lead to some of the best records ever
For
made.
sure. Yeah.
Track has been a big one, and there has been times where it is definitely created a pretty big issue, like to the point where, bands have had to kind of like either fire their drummers on the spot or ask them to not play on the record. And when that happens, there's also a good chance that that drummer may leave the band.
Yeah.
And it's also tough too, because with something like drums, it's such a physical instrument. And I have witnessed, I've recorded drummers multiple times where they've nailed it, and other times they're just having a really bad day,
Sure.
and it's just a bad day. And
I can't
the
say I've ever
problem with
met
something like
any
drums,
one of those. I'm just
no, not you. I'm definitely not talking about you.
no, I'm just kidding.
But yeah, no, but sorry, or drummers and vocalists is another one. Like,
Yeah, totally.
I've had to move or cancel sessions because someone is just not sounding very good that day. And it's such a headspace instrument that if you're not nailing it and you're not in the right place mentally, you can't really force it. I think it's certain things like guitar and bass tracking, you can kind of get away with if someone's not totally playing up to snuff, or
Mhm.
isn't feeling super well, but they can just kind of dive through it a little bit. So yeah, click track has always been a big one. And a lot of guitar players have never even really experienced double tracking before. Like,
Right.
sometimes I'm, if we're going for a really big guitar sound and I'm like, all right, let's do that again, but like maybe an inversion or like different tone, they're just kind of like, oh, okay. So I have to play that mostly the same again. And even something really basic like that, it has happened where people are like, every time I do it, it's a little bit different,
Right.
Um,
They're like
so
hearing themselves
that's
clearly for
happened
the
too.
first time.
Yeah, and I will say, when you get into those situations, you do, as a producer engineer, you do have to know when the better studio technique is not going to happen, and it's, if anything, it's just going to kind of destroy the workflow, and kind of just really hold back the project to the point where it might be better to go with a more limitation based technique and keep the momentum and keep the morale up than to make everything perfect. Yeah, there's so many. I'm trying to think. This one I got to think about for a second, because
Yeah.
every day, I'm in here, I say to myself, this is a mistake in my head. And I'm not necessarily right about those every time. I mean, there's a lot of times where I do think I am, but there's a lot of times where I'm sure maybe I'm wrong in this scenario. The biggest thing that I've really, being on the production side, and also being on like an artist band side over the years,
Mhm.
I basically have like a split personality. Like, when I'm working on my own stuff, I kind of go into the same headspace as a lot of artists and bands that I'm recording. But when I'm in the chair and I'm witnessing it, I can be a lot more removed and a lot less biased and be able to separate myself a little bit more and make clear decisions.
Yeah.
But I totally understand the rabbit hole mentality that certain people have to, like, some people aren't happy until something is played perfectly. And some people aren't happy until, like, the right amount of things are in the track, or, it moves a certain way. But what I will say is overthinking seems to be the most common one. Whether that's like piling on too much, um, overthinking every part, you know, um, stressing yourself out while you're playing, that like,
Yeah.
oh, that note's a little bit of a flub, or
Right.
because I mean, I don't get a lot of opportunity to work on my own music here because essentially it's my full-time job. I'm working on a record right now for myself, and when I'm trying to work on my own stuff, like, I really try to keep it very stress-free, very off the cusp. I think it's really good to have an idea going into the studio, but I think that a lot of people come in and they already have the whole process, or I should say the whole product, in their head. They already imagine exactly how it's going to turn out.
Yeah.
And there's so many variables in
Right.
a recording session, in a room, on a particular day, who you're working with.
Yeah.
You can have days where just magic happens, and you can have days where everyone's just kind of hitting a wall. And so I have a lot of people come in and be like, oh, this is our single, it's gonna like be amazing, and it's like, this track's gonna just like totally kill.
For sure.
And they end up getting really disappointed when it doesn't. Sometimes that track doesn't turn out the way they thought, but then another track, which they don't even really like as much, ends up being like this amazing thing that everyone loves. So
Yeah.
I think that artists and bands sometimes can be their own worst enemy. And I'm always kind of trying to ride the line of being a part of the project and being involved, but also separating myself a little bit to just say, like, hey, like, you're overcooking this.
Yeah.
Like, you're overthinking this. Like, music should, I think production should be interesting and it should be well done. But when you're in a stressed, anxiety driven mentality, I don't think you can often produce good work. I think,
Right.
Keeping a really positive and relaxed mindset and learning how to let go a little bit is, I think, one of the most important things. And you have to, again, it goes back to choosing the right person you're going to work with and having faith in that person as well. Well, one thing I will just quickly say about demos is I've come to the point where a lot of this is out of just time that I
Yeah.
don't have, but recently in the last couple of years, I've actually stopped listening to a lot of demos. Like, I'll maybe give demos a really quick listen just to get an idea. This is also coming from somebody like myself, who usually is working with something that I'm aware of. Like, I'm aware of the artist or the band and what their music sounds like. And there will be communication beforehand. But demos can actually be another one of those things that can really hinder the studio process. People get really attached to demos. They get demo-itis. It's a term in this industry, and it is very real. And one way that I've kind of I think that has solved that is sort of the way a lot more people are recording these days and like demoing, is by multi-tracking at home.
Yeah.
So a lot of the projects I've worked on in the last couple of years, it's a lot of artists that have done stuff at home with pretty minimal setups, like a very simple interface and like a microphone, a
Yeah.
lot of direct in sounds. And I feel really confident as a producer engineer to work on those demos essentially. So a lot of the projects that I've been doing in the last couple of years have been basically working off people's like rough productions
Right.
and doing things like reamping their DIs and working with like their synth tracks, redoing the elements that aren't quite up to snuff, adding and layering, and it becomes this kind of like a lot more collaborative effort. Now that is mostly when I'm working with a solo artist or like a project that's like one or two people.
Right.
When it comes to bands, you can either go two ways. You could record like a rough iPhone recording of a song in a room just to get a vibe. And what I used to do a lot, especially when I was working with a lot more full bands, was go to their rehearsal spaces and sit there and like listen to the songs, give some suggestions before we would go into the studio. Like maybe don't play this fill here, this bass line's too busy, or maybe adding a guitar part here. So that was like a big part of my pre-production when I was working with full bands. But now, because a lot of the work I'm doing is leaning a little bit more heavy towards smaller member productions, I find people are able to kind of bring in their like Ableton or Logic or even GarageBand files, and we can start working off of those. Like a project I just finished recently, we ended up using all the vocals that the artist recorded at home because they just, in a lot of cases, people can't replicate what they got on the demo, which was this really intimate, original kind of thing. So I kind of made, when we first opened the studio about 9 years ago, a lot of the projects were doing things as live as possible. And I found I just wasn't really happy with a lot of those results. And around 2014 or so, I kind of decided that like multi-tracking everything was sort of my favorite way to do things, because you could just really focus on every part that you're adding to a song. And with a lot of people having resources to do stuff at home, you can multi-track just like a direct bass or a direct guitar. And if you bring it to somebody that knows what they're doing in a studio, you can actually, that could be your final performance, And I think that a lot of people are really a lot more comfortable working at home with certain things like vocals or guitar parts. So if someone feels a little bit more relaxed at home, then maybe recording your DI and then bring it to a studio and just reamping for like tones and stuff later. And then you don't have that anxiety or feel like you need as much time in the studio to, because when I am doing a very guitar based record, sometimes I could spend like 5 to 6 days on just guitars. So for people that are looking to maybe cut down on that a little bit, like that's a really good way to do it. So recording things separately, recording things really clean, not processing things too much, or at least having like a backup is really important, because it just kind of it gives, you leave a lot more options if you do bring it to a professional, you go to a professional studio. If you're a band and you record a demo in your jam space with a couple mics in the room, you can't use any of that. Like that's never going to be something that you're going to use again, But if you do multi-track things, it can be very useful.